Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, greetings listeners. It's the second half of June, the 18th I believe, and oodalali, summer has hit with a sledgehammer. It's the kind of day where you can feel the heat on your skin. You can feel the humidity envelop you when you step outside of your air-conditioned home. I hope you have an air-conditioned home if you live in a place where it gets this warm. And I don't even live in the South. This is Chicago. I remember when I used to live in Florida and it would get this hot by 6 a.m. So it's a roasty toasty day. If I sound like I'm panting a little bit, apologies. I've also still not found my good microphone. So if this sounds a little clunky, it's because I'm still using my backup. So conversing over on the Board Game Geek Guild 3269, where a few regular listeners are posting things. Hello, folks. I was wrapping up the Kickstarter episode when Wes, who originally asked the question about Kickstarter, posted a couple comments about his activity on Kickstarter, and I realized there are two obvious episodes left to do in my discussion of what Kickstarter is for, and that's a discussion of what I use it for in two parts. Part one would be what I use it for as a consumer. Part two would be what I use it for as a producer. So today is going to be the consumer episode, and next time will be the producer episode. So as a consumer, I did a little printout here. If you can hear the paper rustling, that's some high quality Foley work right there. You can hear the paper rustling as I look over my list of Kickstarter backing history. I figured out I have backed roughly 100 projects. Actually, that did fill. There's maybe another 15 or 20 that I backed that did not succeed. But of the ones that succeeded, I'm just at 100 projects. At a quick tally, 70 of those are game projects where I actually got a game at the end of it. 10 of those are game-related support projects, and the other 20 are other things like comics, movies, music, and other endeavors. So I want to talk a little bit about what I have backed on Kickstarter, the kinds of things I've done. I thought I'd start oldest and work my way forward, and we'll end with a quick summary of the things I'm currently jazzed and waiting for in the mail over the next year or so. So, going all the way back in time to 2012, give or take. Early 2012 would have been when I backed my first Kickstarter project, and that would be Santa vs. Dracula, a full-color comic in which Santa Claus finds the North Pole under siege by Dracula and his minions. It sounded like a cute project. I think I saw a reference to it on Boing Boing, perhaps, and it sounded neat. It was just a single artist and single writer, and it ended up taking them a very long time. I don't think it delivered until 2015, but it did deliver, and it's a cute comic book. I still have it in my collection somewhere. Of those early projects that I did, let's see, the first 10 projects I did, 4 of them were games. This would have been right about the time that I was starting to get into the game hobby again. I had been a gamer off and on for a long time. We've talked about that, I think. And so this was early in the board game Kickstarter days when things were still footloose and fancy-free. But I did back a couple early games. The first game I backed was the second project I backed on Kickstarter. That was Miskatonic School for Girls, the deck building game. I actually backed it for a friend of mine, and had it sent to him, and then I enjoyed it so much I ordered a copy for myself later, or he liked it, but I ordered a copy for myself later because it's fun. It's a fun game. It's really interesting. I mean, it's a little clunky by the standards of today's deck builders, but for its time, it's pretty interesting. The premise of it is that it's a standard deck builder where you draw cards and you play things, but the idea is you are a student in a school for girls in Miskatonic, in Arkham. It's the Miskatonic School for Girls, so it's within the H.P. Lovecraft world. The art is very cutesy. The idea is all the teachers are otherworldly horrors, and you are the students. Students are divided up into houses, and your goal is for your house, the members of your house to go mad more slowly than the other houses. And on your turn, you buy one friend for your house, and you buy one teacher to put in one of your opponent's houses. So the idea is you're attacking your opponents and trying to hurt them while helping yourself. It's pretty interesting, a fun little game. I mean, by today's standards, it's a bit clunky, but still fun, still one my kids like to get out occasionally. I also, from that same company, ordered Castle Dice, and that would have been like a year and a half later or so. Castle Dice is a dice drafting game where everybody picks dice and rolls them, and you take turns drafting them and getting resources, which you then use to build a castle. And the player with the best castle at the end wins. They did a expansion later called More Castles that lets you differentiate yourself from your opponents a little bit, makes it more fun. The art on that is great. But the other, of those first 10 projects I did, I wanted to call attention to one other one that I supported in 2011 or 2012, I guess, as well, which was Tropes versus Women in Video Games. I think I've mentioned before. This was going to be a small video series on YouTube analyzing the depiction of women in video games, and a bunch of misogynistic video game jerks decided they didn't like the idea of people talking about how women were depicted, and they endeavored to be mean to the people. And I use be mean as a shocking understatement to the kinds of behavior that was exhibited, but they led a campaign of harassment against Anita Sarkeesian and her group that still goes on today. But so I wouldn't probably have donated to it, because as a film scholar or a media scholar, the idea that women were depicted badly seemed self-evident to me, and I felt like it had been discussed some, but apparently not enough. So I ended up kicking in $10 just out of, as a way to say, despite her enemies. And the videos she ended up making were comprehensive and really interesting, so money well spent. So that was the beginning of my Kickstarter days. Very quickly I moved into board games. Like I said, of the 100 projects I've done, 70 of them have been board games. Wanted to call highlights to a couple really interesting ones, or lessons, examples in the kinds of things Kickstarter is good at. One game I backed is called the Goonies adventure card game. This is an example of how you can kind of get lured in by Kickstarter. That the Goonies is a property that my wife and I both really enjoy, and honestly I got this because I thought it sounded like fun to play with my wife. When we got the game, it's an interesting puzzle, but it didn't really click with us, so we haven't played it much. It's just kind of sat on the shelf. It's from designers Matt Riddle and Ben Pinchback, which is a pretty good design pair, and I think the game probably deserves better than I've given it, and probably needs another try. But when we played it the once, it didn't really go very far for us, but it makes me think I should get it out again. But the idea of playing the Goonies as a game was pretty fun. That's much newer, though. I skipped over a page. No wonder. I was like, that seems pretty new. What are some older ones I wanted to look at? Well, I've mentioned before, A Study in Emerald was one of the first games I backed on Kickstarter. That was a game done by Martin Wallace as part of his Tree Frog imprint. And I've talked about that a lot, so you know what that is. But it was one of the first real board games that I did on Kickstarter. And the first time I heard the name Martin Wallace. So that was pretty exciting. And I remember when that game came in, that was one of the first games I really followed with vigor. Shortly thereafter, my Great White Whale of a Kickstarter, the Pyramid Earthsphere, which I've talked about before also, is about like sailing dirigibles flying around. It was a sort of disaster of a Kickstarter where they drastically underestimated what things were going to cost, and then they didn't manage their money very well anyway, and the project has stalled and never delivered, and that funded in 2013, so that's been a long time coming. The other thing I wanted to mention, another project that I helped pay for and never saw fruition, was the Under the Smogberry Trees, the true story of Dr. Demento. This was a documentary meant to explore the history of Dr. Demento as a producer and a curator of weird music. It was well supported and well received, and when it was funded, they were working with Dr. Demento himself. Within about a year, he had broken off contact with the filmmakers and decided he didn't want to work with them. And they indicated that they had enough footage to make their documentary anyway. But as far as I know, we never saw the light of day, and I never did get my DVD of that movie. Reminds me, when I do a retrospective like this, or even just when I look back over my backed projects, and I see things that never delivered, I'm inclined to go, hey, what the heck happened with that? Another early game that I actually really like still, and this makes me want to play it again, is called The Agents. The Agents was an early Kickstarter game. Really nice art. Reminds me of the art in something like 100 Bullets or other comics of that nature. The idea is it's a spy game where you play a spy master with a group of spies that work for you, and you've all been let go. You know, your official support from your country has been shut down, and you are trying to figure out how to survive. And so you have these agents, and the way the game works is each card has two effects, one on the top and one on the bottom. And when you play it, you get to do the one on your side, and you make the person on the person you're playing it at. So you're playing it between you and one other player. If there's three of you around the table, you're sitting. And so you play it between you and this other player in a line. And the symbol facing you, you do that thing. And the symbol facing them, they do that thing. And usually that thing is good, but sometimes you can orchestrate it so doing that thing is bad. Apparently, even though I thought that was really clever, the designers decided people did not like that element of it. And it became something where they could opt to do it. They weren't forced to do it. They could choose to do it or not, which I think takes a lot of the teeth out of it. But that was part of the second edition, which they also kickstarted. I kickstarted at the level where I got all these extra cards, which meant there's a big deck of cards to play with. And they produced the game on this sort of plasticky cardstock, which was made for really interesting. It makes the cards shuffle in an interesting way. I ended up not paying for the fancy box that the game came in, which I kind of wish I had, because I ended up going and buying a box for $15, I think, which is close to what I would have had to pay for their fancy box, and then to keep my game in. But so I have that. That's The Agents, which is good. So, like I said, I backed a lot of games. There's a number of different games from Fun to 11, which is a company I've enjoyed. They've been kind of quiet for a while, but they've been working on a card game. I think it's called JRPG, the card game, based around the idea of the Japanese role-playing games. So it'll be interesting to see when that comes out. Another big one I backed a while back was the Apocrypha Adventure card game. That was one where I looked at it and thought it sounded neat, and then I dithered about it for a long time, and I ended up backing toward the end of the campaign when it had a lot of stretch goals met. So far, they've delivered one of the boxes of the game, and ultimately it's going to be 3 boxes. So there's a lot of content there. I'll admit, I haven't even played it. I got the rulebook out and read it, and I found it pretty difficult to parse, so I haven't dived into it too much. It looks really neat, and Rado made a video about how to play that I thought explained it very nicely, but I just haven't gotten it to the table. So that's one I mean to try soon. There are a couple of games that I supported for just $1, where I wanted to see what the campaign was doing and ultimately just give them a little support, even if I wasn't going to buy the game. I'm not sure what the value of that is, although it does help when people look at a game and they see how many people are backing. I think having an extra backer in there never hurts. One game series that I've backed a couple times now, and I guess the third one's coming soon, is called The Dale of Merchants. This is a game, when the first one came out, I thought it looked neat, but It was coming out at a time when I didn't really have the funds, or I was feeling a little overspent, so I backed at the $5 print and play level, and I did a print and play of it for myself, and it turned out to be really fun. So then when they did the second game, I backed that at the print and play level as well, because might as well, now that I have the first one. So apparently there's a third one coming also, which I think I will back again at the print and play level. However, the artist, the guy who made this game, also made a big box epic adventure game that has a kind of the artist and designer of that series also made a big box epic adventure game called Dawn of the Peacemakers. That's more of a legacy style game. What's really interesting about it is the idea that you play ambassadors from a nation, and you're trying to hold off war. So a lot of games, start with war. In this game, your goal is to not have war. So it makes for a pretty interesting idea as a game system, and that's supposed to deliver sometime next year. I think probably by Essen this year, maybe. So I'm really excited for that. Let's see what else. I mentioned the Goonies already. I've done a couple. Like I said, I mentioned one of the things I've done are some board game support Kickstarters. So this would be, I've participated in the Kickstarter for Richard Ham Rado twice, and now I'm one of his patrons as well. I value the service that he provides our hobby quite a bit, and so I contribute money toward that effort. I've also participated in the Rodney Smith Watch It Played. Well, he does Indiegogo, but same thing. And the Dice Tower and the Secret Cabal. So all of those are projects I've supported. There have also been a variety of things. Like there was a board game cafe here in Chicago called Bonus Round that I gave a couple bucks to. That sort of thing. Probably the best, I gotta say, the best payoff in terms of Kickstarter to hours played of anything I've gotten on Kickstarter thus far has to be Gloomhaven. I participated in the second printing of Gloomhaven, which I got for an incredible $99. Shipping maybe was another 10 or 15 or 20, but still, you look at the retail cost on that game is $140 now, and it's not uncommon for people to pay more than that. And from what I understand, the market value of that game is, the market value is incredible. There's so much stuff in that game. I can easily see, assuming we don't get burned out on it, I can easily see us playing that on a regular basis for years. And I'm excited to be playing it with my family and enjoying it. So that's Gloomhaven, probably the best payoff I've gotten. So I have a few games. I thought I'd jump now as I'm ending my program here. Thought I'd talk a little bit about recent projects I've backed, things that I'm currently waiting for in the mail. So let's see what we got. We have the Networks Executives. This is the expansion to the Networks, which Gilhova is producing and should be arriving sometime soon. We have Cerebria, the Inside World, which is the next game from Mind Clash Games, the people who make Anachrony and Tricarion. I am eager to see that game and play it. So far, everything that they've made has been a hit for me, so I suspect that will continue to be. I mentioned Dawn of the Peacemakers already. We have Pulp Detective, which looks like an interesting little solo game, but also designed by a designer whose name I can't, David something. He has a thread on Board Game Geek, and I really like his art. So mostly I just back that to support him. We have a 2-player microgame called Leviathan that was produced locally by Chicago games designers and a Chicago artist. That's pretty fun. Then recently I've backed the Werewords Deluxe Edition. We talked about that previously on the episode. The Australia board game. This is the Martin Wallace follow-up to A Study in Emerald. It's not at all a sequel. It's a different kind of game, but it looks really fun. Lots of great art and components. Actually led a group buy of that, which was an interesting experience. So when that comes, I'll have to meet up with people and get their $6 for the shipping. Crypt is a small box game about robbing your father's crypt. Like your father doesn't leave. It's an old-timey fantasy game where your father doesn't leave you enough stuff, and so you decide to rob his crypt, but all your siblings felt the same, and so you're taking turns swiping stuff out of dad's crypt. That's also produced by some local friends. And then two more, we have the game Lincoln, another Martin Wallace game. This is about the Civil War and uses some of the same systems as A Few Acres of Snow, from what I understand. And finally, I've mentioned this a couple times, I'm really excited about the Hellboy game, which should deliver probably mid to late next year, I imagine. But it has lots of miniatures and should be a lot of fun. So that's what I use Kickstarter for, mostly ordering board games these days. But, and I guess that I do look at the provenance of the publisher, and I'm more inclined to go with independent publishers. The well-established publishers are less likely to get my Kickstarter dollars, because often the game is cheaper when you buy it later. Yes, I know that Tasty Minstrel makes some really nice blinged out games, and next time that they're selling a game I'm interested in, from that perspective, I would probably get it, but so far I haven't seen anything that tickled my fancy. So what are you enjoying on Kickstarter? Wes has already posted some of his recent games funded. What are you backing? What's a game that you backed that never delivered? What's the best value you've gotten from your backing dollars? Hop over to Board Game Geek, Guild 3269, and let us know. I'm Wombat929 on there. You can also reach me, Brendan, at rattleboxgames.com, or you can tweet at rattleboxgames and find me that way. That's about it for my time, so thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time, or talking to you next time. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.